welcome to another episode of Relationshipping.
What up,
Yes.
y'all? We're live. Oh, what's that?
Well, that was a little bit of theme music. You want to hear it?
Okay. That's new.
Yeah. You're watching Relationshipping, and let me tell you something. We're going to have so much fun. Let's go ahead and cut the crap, right? I'm your host, LaDonna, Raeh, and
Hey, this is Lorenzo T. Hughes. Man, you kind of took me back. I felt like I was in the 70s.
you are,
I had an afro. I felt I just bell bottoms on.
you've been there before. Well, listen, today's episode is forthcoming. I know you guys have probably seen the title. Those of you that are listening at home on either YouTube, any of your podcast streaming platforms, and on Clubhouse, we want to thank you for tuning in with us. Here's the thing. Many of us, we have relationships either with coworkers, neighbors, actual relationships, bang, 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 those types of relationships. But then you have those relationships with parents, with your children. And that's why this show was born, because it is called Relationshipping. Because having a relationship doesn't end with just a relationship.
Right.
You get my relationship?
Yeah, work relationships.
Yeah.
You have your intimate relationship. You have your family relationships.
You have lack of work relationships or lack
Or
of
just
relationships.
Lack of relationships.
I know, right? That part. So, I've been in. I'm sure we've all, based on where you are in life, you've experienced different types of relationships. But today we're gonna focus on church relationships.
Ooh.
Yes. The title of this episode is Church Hurt and Healing. Why some of us are leaving the pews, or some of y'all. If growing up, you probably went to church, right, Lorenzo?
Well, Easter, special event days, and stuff like that. But when we were around my great grandmother in Arkansas,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was
So,
mandatory.
okay, so what was
Um,
church like for you?
Church for me, I really didn't start going to church, like literally going to church, and this was not, and this was willingly. Like when I was in high school, I I dated a friend. I'm not
Preacher's
gonna say her
kid?
name, something like that. Yes, yes. And my girlfriend's grandmother uh, wouldn't allow me to date her unless I went to church every Sunday. And it was the long church. Back then, I had to go to Sunday school and I had to go to service. So, I did I don't know what it felt like hours, but did Sunday school and then it was like church service was like 3 hours or something like that. It was long. So, yeah, and to kind of give you an idea, it was kind of that Southern Baptist type of church,
Oh, good
where
choirs.
it was that. And then, where, somebody would be up giving a talk or a speech. Then all of a sudden you get that, and then it just spreads out the church, and then the organ will start playing. Then people will start jumping up and jumping around and running through the church and around the church and getting the Holy Ghost and all that stuff. So it was that kind of church. But yeah, I started going because my girlfriend's, like her grandmother wouldn't allow me to go to church, and her grandfather was the pastor of the church.
Mm.
So yeah, I did
All
Sunday
eyes on
school,
you.
and I wasn't a church person, so I hated Sunday school. It was traumatic for me, it was traumatic because uh, it was the tradition. It was the traditional church that they didn't believe anything but reading out of the King James version of the Bible. And when you're a young kid, when I say young kid, like 15
Mm-hmm.
uh, years old, 14, 15 years old, you don't I wasn't even reading Shakespeare at that time. So whenever we would go around and read scriptures in Sunday school, every time we read a scripture, whoever was leading would say, okay, well, what do you think that scripture, what does that scripture mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
And when they asked me that, I didn't know what the heck I just read. I read it to the best of my ability. Pronunciate I tried to pronunciate and enunciate everything properly. And they would ask me, so Lorenzo, what did that scripture mean to you? And I would have this long pause, like, well, and I would try to come up with an answer, and I would give my answer. Then it'd be this dramatic
Correction.
silence. Then they'd be like, well, LaDonna, help Lorenzo out, with this scripture. And it just made you feel so small,
Yeah.
you know?
And church is supposed to be a safe space. I mean,
Yeah,
when I was growing up, uh,
and you're absolutely right.
yeah, when I was growing up, my grandmother was a usher, and she had the white gloves and the white skirt and the white hat and everything. Kind of looked like a nurse now that I think about it.
Uh-huh.
But she did not play about questioning the Bible. And I remember having questions. I remember asking and challenging some things that just didn't add up to me. I challenged some things when I talked to my great aunt who read the Bible faithfully daily. She had those devotionals.
Uh-huh.
And she would send them money every month. Like, she did not play about that. And I've seen them still, the little booklet. And she would base her reading off of those booklets that came in. And when it was time to sit down and read the Bible, that's what we had to do in order for me to do what I wanted to do. But when I had questions, no matter who it was, I was told, don't question God. I didn't know where to go from there. There was no internet. There was no, well, take me to the library. I was a small kid, but this is, as I got older and going to the church, I was a single mother. And the one thing, the narrative that was quite blanketed, no matter which church I went to, was that the man or the men that have been in my life were not to the standard of what a man should be. But then the pastor would kind of glorify who he was. He's a husband, he's a father, and he's a pastor of the church. And that very man that you're standing next to or that's not standing next to you ain't nothing. Yeah, that's something that'll make you run for the hills if you let it.
Wow.
So,
But, it's interesting that you say that, because during that time when I was frequenting the church, I would do it with my friends. We would walk to church because my girlfriend, her cousin, was one of my best friends, and so he went to church regularly, or more often than I did. But we would walk to church and we would grab, we would stop by the candy store, grab some snacks, and go to church. But what we realized, with attending church, was we realized, because we were kids that were in the neighborhood, so we knew a lot of people that would attend the church, and we would listen to them stand up and give, I guess, like confession or testify or whatever.
yeah, testify.
Yeah, they would testify or whatever. But we knew what they were doing the night before, and we saw them. We saw them drinking. We saw them smoking. We saw them doing they adult thing, and we would laugh and gossip and giggle, and during that time we were going to church, the thing we saw a lot of is, even growing up, we and you probably remember this too, especially with our grandparents, you always had to dress up
Oh, yeah.
to go to church.
Yeah.
And it was like you couldn't be poor and go to church, or you couldn't be from the streets and go to church, because if you wore what you could only afford or what you had, then you were almost shunned in church. People would look at you like, how dare you come to present yourself before God wearing poor clothes? How dare you come to church wearing that attire, even if it's the only thing you had. And I think during that time, that would make you feel so embarrassed and so uncomfortable. Um, I could see how, as an adult, how embarrassing that would be, or how uncomfortable that would make me feel if I was seeking some type of comfort in religion or in God, and then the people that claim to be of God uh, did such a thing or treated me in such a manner.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think back on that today, now that I'm older, that 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 is a horrible act
Yeah,
or way to treat someone.
it is. It is. Well, for many of us, church, it was a cornerstone of upbringing. And this is where we learned about faith, community,
Mm.
even found refuge for some of us. But what happens when that very place meant to heal us becomes a source of hurt? Like what you just talked about. So today we're asking, is the modern church still a safe space for everyone or just a select few? Why are families walking away? Why are young people disengaged? Why are they on their phones? Why are they hiding when they find a place to hide inside of the church? And what role does leadership and judgment play in that shift?
Mhm.
These are some things that I've taken notice. There are some churches that I've attended just last week. I opened up publicly about a situation that I went through, and I went straight to my then pastor. He was not supportive, not comforting, more so made me feel like it was my fault.
Oh wow.
When it happened again, I went back to my same then pastor and the assistant pastor, and both of them told me they didn't want to hear it.
Mm.
They were conflicted because they had known the agitator, I'll put it to you like that, way longer, since he was knee high, knew the family, the mother, everything. And they decided to, place their loyalty with the family that they knew the longest versus comforting the situation that I was going through. Ah,
Wow.
that was so difficult because it made me lose faith. And how can you go back to church and eventually feel like you were bringing drama? Like I thought this is something I would have kept to myself, but I felt like, well, I do belong to this church and it only has about 24 pews. So let me go ahead and open up to my pastor and maybe we can work through this. And I was told, no, little girl, we're not interested. So that took away my safe space feeling early on. And that was in my, I think, late 20s.
Oh wow.
Yeah, late 20s. So it's very difficult for me to attend a church and not look for a better outcome. I wish I could. You know how you film movies and edit them?
Right.
You know how you're an actor, right?
Right.
And plus
Right.
you film. You can't just watch a movie. You're looking for the technicalities, what kind of lighting, what kind of camera they were using, the acting. You can't just watch the movie anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Same thing with me. I can't just go to church anymore. I'm looking. I'm looking for that feeling of warmth and that feeling of not being rejected
You
no
know,
matter what church I go to.
and it's interesting that you say that. You say that now you're looking,
Mhm.
right? And it's almost like it's almost like what I just mentioned a little bit ago, but in reverse.
Okay.
Remember, like the church was looking for someone to not come to a coming in through their doors, not looking churchy,
Mhm.
right? Now you have people that are coming to the church looking for you to mistreat or not behave like Christian like.
What do you mean?
Meaning that when you go in and let's say you're new, you're just now attending a church.
Mhm.
You're looking for anything that would say or give you an indication on why you should not attend this church. Like,
Oh.
do I feel welcome here? Do they acknowledge the fact that I'm here? Do they make me feel comfortable? Is this someplace I want to bring my husband, my wife, or my children? Um, so now it's like you're looking for that, because now you see, now we have this, the stereotype is out there, the stereotype of, you know, uh, you know, Christian folks not acting Christian outside of Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Once Sunday morning is over, they turn the Christian off, and they go throughout the next 6 days being a totally different person.
Not, yeah, or a stranger.
So it's like now you have people who are looking for that now. Are you that type of institution? So I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we can look at. Matter of fact, let me pull my notes up,
Okay.
because I want to try to break this down here. Let me
All right. Well, while you do that, um, sometimes, and from this is just conversations that I've witnessed, been a part of. Do sometimes churches can seem cliquish. You've got those that have known each other, cliquish for whatever reason. It could be money, it could be tithe amounts, it could be perceptions, it could be neighborhoods, it could be familiarity, it could be a lot of things. Why they become cliquish, what the cliques are.
and what that does is like you'll hear stories whenever you talk about religion or church. You'll hear things like, when you're speaking specific, they talk about the black church, the numbers are down, or they
Mm.
not what they used to be. Like when you go into a church, you're either going to see more women in the church and no men. You might see uh, more families, or more elderly in the church, depending. And usually older folks don't like any type of change. So as long as you keeping up that, you got the white gloves on when they walk in, and the nurse's hat or whatever, you're gonna see a lot of your
You said
older
them.
folks. I don't know what they call it, the little nurse deal, and the food that you go down in the basement and eat you a meal before you leave.
Ain't no food no more.
Yeah. So you'll find more older people in that setting, but you won't find any young kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you start looking at churches today, is you see a lack of men in the churches, and a lack of young people, a lack of children or youth. And for me, it's disturbing when you see it that way, which means that we have to ask the question why. And it's not so much, like us, we were forced to go to church. It wasn't a choice. It was like, you say with church clothes on, you didn't have a choice. But I don't think forced to go to church is the way to go with it, but it has to be something that influences a young person to want to learn. And I
Yeah.
don't think, I always say that, the Bible itself is taught in, it's written in truth, but taught in error, meaning that the words in it is by all means true in what it's teaching, but the way it's taught, I believe, is where the mistakes come in. And I think we have to look at that and look at what that means to young people. How can do when young people hear what you're teaching, is it something that they can apply to their lives, or is it something that they can reflect on, that they feel includes them, or do they just feel excluded?
I think just the other day I had a conversation with Minister Nuri Muhammad,
Yes.
and he made a comment that the church breakdown starts from the beginning, where our children are taught that Jesus is white.
Mm.
And these children are, I don't want to overuse the word, I don't even want to use the word woke, okay? But our children are much more aware than we were. We had to ask questions. We had to lean on the elders for answers and then go out and get our own answers and do our own research. But now the children have access to so much information and so much misinformation. And if you're learning that the Son of God does not look like you, then who are you? You know, so it's
Listen,
like, I really don't need to be here. I want to, there's some fun facts about the Christian churches, okay? Mainly black Christian churches. First of all, gospel music was born there. Black church is the birthplace of gospel music. Think about Mahalia Jackson, Kirk Franklin, Yolanda Adams, and the list goes on. Donnie McClurkin, okay? Musical roots came right through the church. Back in the day, during the civil rights movement, black churches served as organizing centers for marches, rallies, and voter registration drives.
uh-huh.
I haven't heard voters registration drive in a minute. We're complaining about the 20 million people that didn't vote, but what did you do to go out and make them aware that, you know, hey, maybe you need to register, okay? Also, a black Christian church is a place where everyone learns to speak. Now, I'm not talking about the hooping pastors because I'm not going to go around. I'm not doing that. Maybe James Brown did. But from pastors to politicians, many black leaders sharpened their public speaking skills right in the church. It's the most forgiving place. You get up there and you know how you start crying or you can't remember your words. What does the audience say? That's all right, baby. Take your time. Okay. You do that stuff
You can sound as horrible as all ever.
right for public speaking. Oh, and singing too.
Singing too. Come on now.
Yeah, that's okay. Then they sing right with you off key. And you know, church was reality TV before reality TV. So those are just a few things. Not to mention Soul Food Sunday was at the churches. Like you said, the food was in the basement. But I don't see those things happening in the church now. Church has turned into a business.
Yeah, I can see that.
It went from being a hub to a business. And if I feel like, see, a business is a choice. Like I'm not required to support your business. But if church is still ran as the things I mentioned, you got to have guest speakers come in. You got to have soulful music. Like I know I will go to a church, a gospel Southern church. I can't wait to get down south just to hear the choir. Not this AI animation or automation, whatever they doing now with this singing, you know. And just and the church dinners, you know, budget cuts. I get it, but you got to take up an offering. Don't kill the food. Food always brings people out. But go on. Did you find your research? Your notes?
No, I'm still trying to figure out how I want to take this. But you said something very interesting. You know, it was very uninspiring. You know, when you're a kid and everything you see about heaven doesn't look like you. You can go in a Catholic church right now. You won't even see any brown angels or anything. They got those little chubby angels with the wings, you know, flying around. Nothing looks like you. So you didn't exist. You don't exist in heaven, in the images of heaven that they have. Like you go into a lot of these old church institutions. Like I said, I've been in several Catholic churches. This is when I was doing photography for their catalog. I purposely looked for some brown angels in their imagery. And based on the imagery, we did not even exist as angels in heaven. So these things are very uninspiring when we talk about,
Right.
but especially if we talk about trying to recruit young people, or to say that, God is all loving and all inclusive and all these other things, but you weren't included when it came to creating angels and things like that.
Yeah,
But
it's like, well, I'm not gonna make it anyway.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So you see this, and when we talk about, churches losing members, it's like, how is it because there's a lack of influence to the for the people in that community? Like, if you want young people, or if you want more men involved into the church, I mean, what's the influence behind it?
Right. What attracts more men?
What attracts them?
And I think oftentimes they think that women attract more men, but that's not the case. They can get them on
Well,
Tinder now.
I'll say it like this. When you I believe that could be the case. But when you're a man and you deal with um male bashing
Mm-hmm.
in the community, but then you got to go to the church and the pastor's doing it too.
Right. You got to tuck your tail between your legs while
Right,
he's
right.
speaking.
You got to go to church and feel, and hear about how horrible you are too.
Mm-hmm.
So and we don't want men don't we don't want to hear that.
Mm. And it makes me uncomfortable, to be honest with you. And when I'm standing there and I'm listening to these messages,
Mm-hmm.
it makes me uncomfortable. Like, where's the upliftment?
Right.
Where is the people like to feel welcome? I don't care if they are members, visitors, crew members. People like to feel welcome. They like to know that when they come through the doors of X church, that they are going to be loved, embraced, welcomed.
And you're absolutely right, because see, when I go to the mosque, Nation of Islam, as a man, when I walk in the door, they they greet you with a smile. They talking to you. They're welcoming you.
They're not
They
hitting
asking
you
your
with a
name.
task list.
They introducing themselves. They're shaking your hand, even while they're patting you down before you walk in. But they're happy. At least if it's an act, it's a very good act.
Mhm.
But they make you feel welcome when you walk through the door. It's
What if you're not dressed right?
you're still welcome.
Mm-hmm.
They're glad to see that you're there when you're not dressed right, or I don't know what right is, but like I said, if and I think we've all experienced, or seen how the Nation of Islam dresses, and they do it for the sake of uniformity.
Mm-hmm.
Like a military. They conduct themselves, like a military, so that's their uniform. But you feel welcome, as a guest, to their service, and I think you don't get that same feeling, or that if it's offered, it doesn't feel genuine.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel genuine.
Yeah. It's nothing like that genuine feeling. Knowing that you're coming to fellowship with your brothers and sisters,
Mm-hmm.
it draws you. You will go through anything and everything to be present, just because you can predict what that feeling is going to be like. Hey, Bree, how you doing?
Right.
You can feel that. It's because the world is so judgmental as it is. So, have you ever walked into a church and felt judged because you you know what I'm saying? You just feel it. Have you ever experienced that?
I've had that feeling, but those are the religious institutions that or churches where you show up and church is not in the people or
Mm-hmm.
in the person,
Mm-hmm.
or church might be in them temporarily, but like I mentioned earlier, church is in them today, but the rest of the week is not.
Right. They show
But
up.
people are at church, but church is not in them.
Mm-hmm. They're at church. They're not in church.
Right. Yeah, they're in church, but church is not in them.
Now let me ask you about the young people.
Mm.
We were talking about earlier. We touched on there may be older parishioners there, and the one thing that I observe just from a marketing standpoint, because again, if you want to, what happens when the older crowd gets older and older, and eventually they are at the pearly gates? How do you bring in young people? Because there's a generational gap. I mean, many youth programs are underdeveloped, outdated, or they don't even exist. And
Well,
you got to keep up with the times. It's not like it used to be. You can't just throw a coloring book and tell people to, color Jesus,
mhm.
because you have to get these young people. You almost have to recruit teenagers to take over. I mean, teens often say church doesn't speak to me. They say that.
I do believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I was a part of the church I attended back home in Kansas City. I was a part of the Men of Faith program and their youth leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So what?
Hey,
Well,
Bree.
I was part of the youth church.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the young ladies, the teens, the female teens, were more engaged than the boys were.
Yeah.
Uh, I would sit back and watch to see the reactions when they would read a scripture and talk about it. Yeah, the boys, their heads would be down. They would be in their phones, drawing, doodling, and doing all other kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So even when it came up to, the Q&A afterwards, the girls they had more input on what was read, and they had more thoughts, and they had more
Wait,
questions.
hold on one second. Bree, I saw your hand up, and so I invited you to speak just in case you want to come up. All right. Go
Okay,
ahead.
yeah, come
Sorry.
on in whenever you feel up to it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a process that I think religious or church institutions really, I believe they really should look into that,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because they're not engaged. Now, when they come in and we're playing games and stuff like that, we got
Right.
the games and the donuts, they're talking. But I do know when we had breakout sessions and I was given instructions
Yeah.
on how to run my breakout session, they didn't become more engaged until I broke away from the breakout session and we
Ah,
were allowed to speak openly and freely.
okay. Well, we got Bree. Bree is on stage with us. Hey, Bree.
What's going on, Bree?
Oh, I think
Bree?
Yes,
there's.
I can't believe y'all calling me up here. I just came in to listen to y'all,
Oh,
and then I
Oh,
Bree,
clicked the
I
link.
remember you. Hi.
Hi, and then I clicked the link, and I saw your show was live, and I said, "Oh, let me listen." But you keep calling me, so I feel bad
Oh,
oh,
sitting in
no.
the audience.
You don't
I said,
have
"Let me
to.
don't
go
feel
up so
bad.
they
No.
guests don't think that they not talk. They talking to themselves. There is somebody in the audience saying that. So I'm just
Okay.
listening. I'm here to support.
Okay, Bree, you are
Thank
so
you,
sweet. I
Bree.
remember I was in your rooms quite a bit. I miss you.
Yeah.
We had fun. Okay, well we'll just continue talking. Don't feel obligated. Just jump in if you feel the need.
Okay, I'm
All
gonna
right, thank
listen
you.
and just support y'all.
All
Okay,
right,
thank
thank you.
you. All right. Hey D, how you doing? All right. So yeah, in order to get these teenagers involved, these underdeveloped youth programs are going to have to be looked into. You almost have to have a task force to
Hmm.
say, okay, listen, in order for us to get the teens in here, we've got to speak their language. Like, what are they thinking? Because a lot of these, I was surprised. I've spoken to a lot of teenagers that didn't even believe in God.
Hmm.
That was unheard of when I was a teenager.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
these kids, they 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 have their own mind, and if you can't back up what you're telling me to believe in, then there goes the faith. Period. Yeah.
And I think that I think lack of leadership or proper leadership
Mm-hmm.
may play into that. I don't think they don't. I don't think they don't want to believe that there is a higher power. I do believe they believe that there is a higher power, but it's trying to explain to them or teach them how that they are that higher power. They are connected to they have a relationship or connection to that higher power that they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And just because they use terms like higher power or spiritual, it still goes back to being God. People want you to say God, as if a higher power or the most high or being spiritual doesn't mean God. God in the Bible says that he's spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
It's in there. Now, the one thing you don't find in the Bible is religion or Christianity.
Mm.
That's nowhere in the Bible. But so when you have things like that, which I believe, especially if you have young people that read and they find these things in the Bible, then you start to lose you start to lose their interest when they start to feel like you're misleading them.
Right. You'll lose
Then
them.
you're going to start losing them at
Yep.
that point.
Instantly.
And then, and if you claim that, now look, if you one of those Christians that you stamp Christian on everything you say and that you do and your actions don't show it, you're going to lose them that way.
Mm-hmm.
That one way to lose somebody is to not display the thing that you say that you are.
That's right.
You're
Yeah,
going to
you
lose them.
telling them, do as I say, not as I do. That doesn't work anymore. That's what we were told. But if you got the pastor, if the pastor was doing some unforeseen things over the weekend and then showing up to church as if that didn't happen, it makes it kind of difficult to believe in anything that's coming out of his mouth. I do want to recommend, or should I say, reference the Most High, the origin and the meaning of that. It comes from the Hebrew name El Elyon, first appearing in Genesis 14:18 through 20, with, excuse my pronunciation here, Melchizedek. I think I'm saying that right. I think I'm saying it right. The priest of the Most High God. It means the God above all gods, emphasizing God's supremacy and authority over heaven and earth. So when you got people saying the Most High, because I'm not, what is the name of that show that we were watching with the Most High? No. Oh, no, that was the highest. There we go. See, now, yeah, it's they're touching on something that's cultish. But in this case, you're actually talking about a reference that's in the Bible. But if someone is asking you, a young person is asking you where these things are coming from and you just don't know, it means that you haven't studied enough to even teach it. And that's not going to help the situation. Why some say the Most High instead of God, many especially with Hebrew Israelites and Afrocentric faith circles, the Most High is a more respectful and accurate title that avoids the Europeanized names or translations. It's like, look, if I say the Most High, there's no one before, after, to the side. It's just him, okay? It's just him. Hey, David, welcome, welcome, welcome. If you want to come up, just let us know. No obligation.
Yes.
So I am, I don't know. You've gone to the mosque.
Mm-hmm.
I got close. I didn't get to get in there, but I've gone to Catholic churches, Baptist churches, Christian churches. I've even gone to the Kingdom Hall before.
I've been to the Kingdom Hall,
Yeah.
and I've studied with some Jehovah's Witness. Matter of fact, my dad's side of the family are primarily Jehovah's Witness. I've never attended a Catholic church for religious worship or anything like that.
Why'd you go? Because it was an hour long?
I was working.
Okay.
Yeah, I was shooting pictures. I was doing photography. That's how I'd never had the desire to attend a Catholic service. I watched the service because I was packing up.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the service, and I tell you right now, I refuse to kiss anybody, no man's hand.
Right. The ring.
That I wanted to watch. I wanted to stand and just watch though.
Mm-hmm.
I did do that. I think I was in one day where they were doing all these Hail Marys. Some people were coming in. It wasn't no service, but it was open for, I don't know, I guess for Hail Marys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means. Somebody, whoever, studies Catholicism maybe
Yeah.
can explain that. But people would come in, they would dip their hand in this bowl,
Mm-hmm.
I guess wash their hands or cleanse their hands or do whatever they do.
Yeah.
Then they would go into the sanctuary, I think they call it that.
Yeah.
And they would kneel down on the deals and do however many Hail Marys.
Mm-hmm.
And you could hear it throughout the
The
building.
entire bill. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you
like
hear
a
it throughout-
roar.
Yeah, you hear it throughout the whole building.
Yeah. And those of you that are just
Very-
joining us, I'm sorry. Those
No,
of
go
you
ahead.
joining us on Clubhouse, hey guys, you only see one mic lit up. That's because we are on YouTube and Lorenzo and I are coming through the audio source and it's only coming through my account on Clubhouse. So it's not a pre-recording. We are actually here. It's just that we're on YouTube and this is our way of also bringing in our Clubhouse family. So welcome. But back
And-
to what you were saying.
Now, what was really interesting was do the photos for two priests.
What were those pictures like? It had to be beautiful because those
Hold on.
churches are gorgeous.
I took it was for the church directory. Now the one thing I remember going to one of the people I was working with, I was like, man, I said, my next shoot is with one of the priests. I said, what do I call him? I said, you don't call him pastor, do you? And he was like, no, they refer to him as father.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, father. Oh, then in my mind, I'm like, I
I'm
ain't
a
calling
grown
no
man.
man, no other man father. What?
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, let me just give it a try to see what it feels like.
Did your body leave?
And it just felt weird.
Yeah, I bet.
It felt so weird for me,
Well,
but it
Bree
was an experience.
made a comment. She said, exactly. Lack of leadership and also God is not the center or cornerstone of people's lives. They only call on God when they need something. She also says that, however, I do believe that our children are craving a relationship with God. So I think they will be the generation to come back home. Ooh, that is so hopeful.
That's powerful.
It is. Yeah.
That's a powerful thought. She said a couple things in there. When people pray, when they need something,
Mm-hmm.
I said in one of my Bible studies, I told them, because somebody else said something about praying, and I said, sometimes when we've all heard this saying, sometimes you have to be careful of what you pray for.
Mm-hmm.
You truly have to be careful of what you pray for, because when you pray for strength, how God is going to answer your prayer many times is not going to be how you want him to answer it. Because if, let's say you pray for strength, for example, most of us say, oh God, please give me the strength. We've all heard that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're truly praying for strength to deal with, think about this. If I said, LaDonna, I'm praying to you to give me strength so I can lift 300 pounds. You're going to bless me with an exercise gym facility for me to get in there and build that strength,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means you might put together me a program and say, you have to do this. It's mandatory that you do, which means I'm gonna have to go through pain, discomfort, sweat, tiredness. I'm gonna have to have a specific type of diet that's going to help me to build that physical strength. When you're praying for, like, let's say, for example, spiritual strength, for your spirit to be strong, for it to be built, God may in many cases are going to expose you to some things that you may not want to be exposed to, but it's going to build you spiritually. But the thing is, it's going to happen over a period of time. It's not going to happen right away.
Right.
So sometimes you might be wondering, man, I've been praying for God to give me strength, and but I've been going through all these situations. Those situations are building the strength that you're praying for.
So when let's say you go to the church, right? This
Uh-huh.
because the title of this is Church Hurt and Healing, why some of us are leaving the pews.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to your pastor or a leader in the church and you say, I need to I need to get this strength for whatever reason, do you feel like they give you a cookie cutter answer response all the time to the point where your relationship with your church is not really there and it's just, oh, all you got to do is pray?
I think in a lot of cases it do feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel that way. It's rare that you have a pastor that will, or a spiritual leader that will sit you down and ask you things like, so what are you going through? What is it that you're going through that makes you feel like you need strength? And then to listen to you and to explain to you what you're going to have to go through to build that strength. Like, for example, let's say you need strength with dealing with, I don't know, let's say your finances, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he
And
may
they
be
and
able,
they he's a
see,
hiring executive.
right. And see, they don't teach you in church that the Bible talks about money and finance.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the scripture. It's there. One of the statements I mentioned to some religious leaders once is like, I've gone to church for a very long time, and I can honestly say I've heard most of all the sermons that are preached. But I've read the Bible and I've read things in the Bible that I've heard no sermon of. It's almost like
Oh
a
yeah.
routine. It's almost
Oh
like a
yeah.
set type of sermons that are
Yeah.
preached in the pulpit.
Mm-hmm.
There are things in the Bible that I was like, man, I've never heard nobody preach about this right here.
I think they go to a comfort zone. In that,
And
and
maybe it
yeah,
is.
yeah, that might be the uncomfortable zone. There was one time, have you ever gone through marriage counseling? Just say yes or no.
No.
Okay. So I went through premarital counseling. Wow, it's so funny because it's the same pastor that told me he didn't want to hear it. Woo! I was a glutton for punishment.
Oh.
Um, I went to this pastor for premarital counseling, and he seemed so disconnected. And now that I think about it, I think it was because we weren't part of the clique.
Mm.
There were groups in this church. They were, obviously they were fraternity brothers, things like that should not even be considered inside the church. However, I remember going through this premarital counseling and it was so disrespectful because going into the chambers of the pastor, like he's a judge, he had his feet on the desk and he had a ball of rubber bands. You know how you put the rubber
Yeah.
band, and he kept bouncing it off the wall while we were talking. It was so distracting. And all I kept thinking was, if we were that other couple, would he be doing this? I was distracted. I couldn't get that out of my head. And unfortunately, the premarital counseling that I received was not even good advice. Have you ever, you know what I'm saying? You don't expect that when you go to the pastor of your church who has been married and married for a long time to give you terrible advice.
Yeah. You know, that is unfortunate.
So I left.
Yeah.
That's why I left.
Yeah. It almost that's almost like how you mentioned before earlier on, where you said that where pastors and people in church talk about, I'm gonna pray for you.
Yeah.
It reminds me of one thing that upset me about the church, and this is by no means a church bashing session or anything like it. We're just expressing things that we feel and changes that we would like to see. I think sometimes you got to listen to these type of things so that you can know what type of changes to make in your business or in your church or in your nonprofit, your organization, or whatever you're working in, that you're working with. But I remember attending this church, and I've attended some big churches where we had 2 services,
Oh, mega
and they were
church.
big.
Yeah.
The services would be full sometimes. And my issue, one of my biggest issues with the "we just gonna pray for you"
Mm.
is when they have the what do you call it when they have the list of people to pray for,
Yeah, the prayer list.
the prayer list. When they say, well, we want to pray for Sister Jenkins. She needs some repairs on her house.
Mm.
Her roof is falling apart, and we're gonna pray that the Lord bless her. Find somebody. We're gonna pray for Brother John. His car been broke down for the last 4 weeks,
And we got
and
mechanics in the church.
and yes, and I'm thinking to myself, right? I'm pretty good with cars. I'm pretty handy, but I know I'm not the only one. I said I know someone in this church is a handyman or does roofing. He is a mechanic, knows a mechanic, or somebody's in their family is a mechanic. I'm like, when you are a mega church or a big church or whatever, I really don't think, yes, you should pray for people, pray for their good health and things like that, but you have the ability to bless people.
Mm-hmm.
God has the ability to magnify himself through you so that you can bless someone with the gifts that he has blessed you with, the talent, the skill, and the gifts of roofing, auto mechanics, plumbing, massage therapy, nursing, home care, all these different things. You have the ability to bless someone, and you don't look within your church, or you don't know your members enough
That's right.
to where you can say, hey, Lorenzo, I hate to ask this of you. I know, if you have the time, we got sister such and such and such. If you have she's a member of the church, if you can find some time to go take a look at her roof or her house, or Brother John's, his car, go take a look at it and see if it's something that, you can help him with. We can drop you, a little bit of change in your pocket if that's something that you need, if it's going to take you some time or whatever, things like that.
I mean, what are the benefits of being a member? Because when membership is pushed, what is the benefit of being a member?
That's a very good question.
Okay, so wouldn't that be a benefit? Like if we have certain resources in the church, don't you gain access? You already had free will access, but now you definitely get priority access to the resources of the church. You should.
Yeah.
You
Yes,
should.
you
I would
should.
think.
You should. I think.
Well, I mean, somebody says they were in a car accident.
Right.
They had to put their dog down. I'm just thinking about things, that were unforeseen things, that were not favorable things. Shouldn't the church check on you?
They should.
Shouldn't they mention it? Or do they just act like this will blow away soon?
I'm going to say this, and man, I hope my pastor ain't listening. Usually
Me too.
But listen, I'm going to tell you what hurt me about my church. I don't remember, I love my Kansas City pastor. He's amazing. But I'm going to tell you what hurt me about my church. I was a part of the Men of Faith group. I was a part of the youth leadership group where, I worked with the youth church. And I volunteered for the fitness center at our church.
Mm.
And I did, the volunteered for the field trips, and those were fun. When I wasn't able to attend church, I was having, my marriage issues at the time. I was going through my family problems, and I was missing church and wasn't showing up. And then I just stopped showing up altogether. Nobody missed me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how are you a part of of like 3 programs and you just disappear?
Mm-hmm.
And nobody notices?
Nobody asked about you?
Nobody asked. And when those type of things, that really kills your inspiration when nobody recognizes you. When you feel like you've been putting your time in at this at a church, people, your name, people greet you by name and everything, and you're a part of several groups, in the church, and you can disappear and go unnoticed or
seemingly unnoticed.
seemingly unnoticed.
Because if you ask them about, hey, did you? Yeah, we were just letting that blow over.
That literally hurts your feelings.
It does. It does.
Not that, not that I'm special or anything, but I'm kind of special.
You should be.
You know what I'm saying? I feel like I'm kind of, I don't want preferential treatment or anything like that. But if I'm an employee, a volunteer employee, and I'm gone, and you don't check on me, I don't know.
Well,
I'm having flashbacks.
Don't do it. Hammer don't hurt them. Well, look, we can go on and on about this very topic, but we don't fall short of any topic when it comes to relationshiping. But to close out, to kind of get towards the end, you may be part of a church, whether it's a small church, a okay sized church, a church that's just starting up, a church that is probably holding on by the skin of their teeth, or even a mega church. And the larger the church, the more churches are within that church. Find your tribe. Find your tribe. And if your tribe is salvageable at the church that you're at, because looking for a church home is almost as hard as looking for a house, a job, a mate. It's not easy. You don't just flop into a church. You got to try them out, and you got to wait till Sunday to do it. But if you can find your tribe, then or express your feelings to your church leaders, let them know, because they just may not be aware that you have these thoughts, these observations, these feelings. If you cannot resolve the church that you're at, even if your family goes there, how you feel and connect with God is more important than anything. Find you another church.
Yeah, or if you see a problem and maybe you can solve the problem, maybe they're not returning phone calls. Maybe maybe they don't have a secretary returning phone calls. Because who is attending a church right now where they can call the church and nobody ever answers the phone, even when the church is open? Nobody's there to take the calls. And then
We don't even have a phone number.
Then your call don't even get returned. You say you ain't got a phone number?
No, not at my church.
We had a phone in an office.
We had a number, but we didn't have a number.
And thinking about it, maybe I could have started a ministry.
Shame on
start
you.
a ministry. If there's a ministry, if you want to start a ministry where you can bless folks, and you got to take a list of who provide what type of services or possess a specific type of skills, and you can bless someone. Or
what type of ministry would you start if you could start one?
Man,
I'm gonna write mine down.
Mine would probably be that one, because I'm gonna tell you what hurts me is when I see a woman or even a man driving a car and you hear them brakes grinding. They're grinding metal to metal, and that's an easy fix. Fixing brakes is easy. Or you hear that ticking sound from the engine. If the lifters aren't bad, a lot of times you ain't got no oil in there. And your oil done ran out or dripped out or leaked out. Or you see oil leaking out of somebody's car when it's really an oil pan gasket or a valve cover gasket. Those are easy fixes. Mine would be that type of service where I can bless someone. And then, like I said, I'm just real handy. I'm real handy. I like to see people save money. I don't like to hear people say, well, I can't afford to get my brakes fixed, so
I don't like
I'm
that
driving
either.
on metal to metal. It's like,
Yeah.
and it's an easy job. I've told people, I've told a woman once, I said, listen, I said, she didn't have the money and everything. I said, what are you cooking on that day? I said, make me a plate. I said, you buy the brakes and make me a plate. And that's what she did. She bought the brakes. I showed up, and she made me a plate.
What she cooked?
And I sat out there. No, she had some spaghetti with the sausages cut up.
Oh,
in it. It was good with some cornbread. It was good.
Oh, that was nice.
So she made me a plate, and I called that payment. And, it took me about an hour, front and back breaks.
Well, now, if I were to start a ministry, I would want to do a singles ministry, um, an events ministry. Like, I want to put on comedy shows. Yeah, I want to do like comedy shows and plays.
Okay.
Short films. I just want to do that.
Storytelling.
Yeah. Okay. Storytelling. Yeah.
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 That'd be,
I like making people laugh
cool.
though. So yeah, I would do women's ministry. Oh my goodness. I know we have so many of them, but I love sisterhood when it exists.
Youth ministries are fun too. They're
Well,
fun. I think there would be fun for me if I was leading it. Like we wouldn't have a field trip just one time a year. Now we'd probably have it at least one every month or one every other month. Because one field trip a year, like the youth are happy, yay, and then we got to wait another year before we're happy again.
And then they're older and they're not as happy.
Right. So yeah, I would
You
do
have to be
them more
consistent.
often.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would do them more often.
Yeah. Welp, did we leave anything out? Because I don't think.
No comments.
Well, we had one comment and I displayed it. It said, "Love it." That was from Bree.
Thank you, Bree.
Yes, thank you, Bree. And let me see. There's some messages in Clubhouse that I read the messages that were in there. So I don't think I missed anything. But if you're watching this show and it has already live broadcast, please feel free to make comments and share the show. That's so important. Get the message out. We try not to go too long, but of course we can go into does tithing determine your bonding with your pastor? But that's a whole nother show.
That is a whole nother show, because I had a friend of mine who had cancer. When she went to her church, they asked her about her tithing. It was horrible.
What?
And she passed away. Yeah, she passed away. I don't even like when I go back home, I don't even like driving past that church. I don't even like driving past it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, you know what? That's not a real church. It's just a building with a cross on it. All right. So you know what time it is. It is time for us to vacate the premises. I want to thank everybody who has tuned in with us. Make sure you like and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. You know where that subscribe button is. It's free right now. Okay, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button before you have to pay $1. Okay, it's gonna be more than $1. But we always love to see those numbers go up because it gives us the leverage to keep going. There's been so much investment in having a podcast with proper lighting, cameras, sound, mics, soundboard. And you too can have the same setup. If you're interested, feel free to email us at LaDonnaRaeShow@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to sit on the phone with you on a Zoom call and tell you how to do it. It's all on me.
All right.
For free. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Make sure you tune in to us. We'll be back when? Next week?
Next week.
Ooh.
We'll see y'all next week.
It's going to be good.